King of the Monsters, the Neo Geo monster brawling game of destructive tendencies, made its way over to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1992 courtesy of Takara, and the end result is a scaled down but otherwise serviceable little game. You have 4 monsters to play with, the arcade original had 2 more that didn't make the cut here, and you pick a monster and you fight the other monsters in 8 rounds of monster bashing fun, because of course you do. What else would you be doing in a game entitled King of the Monsters? So in a bit of an odd twist, King of the Monsters is basically a wrestling game with monsters. You trade blows, you grapple each other, you execute some basic wrestling maneuvers such as pile drivers and suplexes, and you have to pin your opponent for the 3 count in order to win the fight and move on to the next round. Doing this is easier said than done, however, as vitality seems to serve no purpose in King of the Monsters. In theory, you drain your opponent of health, and once it's down to 0, he's out for the count, right? Well, not so fast, because it turns out even with no vitality, that bastard won't stay down, and things end up lasting longer than they have any business lasting. So you take your frustrations out on the city. Step on a few houses, smash a few buildings, treat the military like the useless peons that they are, then toss their flaming remains at your foe. Pick up P-balls that appear after a big move in order to level up your monster, making him stronger and in different colors. Avoid the electric barriers on each side of the city, as passing through them will harm your monster, and toss him back into the war zone. It's all great fun, with a second player to bash around. Against the computer, not so much, especially with a somewhat finicky grapple system that doesn't work as often as one would like, opponents with more vitality than the meter lets on, and a fairly limited selection of monsters, of which you'll have to fight twice in the single player mode. I would have liked to have played as the poison ghost creature, but alas, it was not to be, not on the Super Nintendo at least. So, King of the Monsters has its warts, but it's not completely off the rails because on a whole it's not all that bad. Yes, there are some issues, but not enough to kill the game entirely. The grappling might be a bit of a hassle, but when it works just like an old wrestling game. Down an opponent and pin him, or pick him back up for another devastating attack. Hell, give yourself some breathing room, hold both punch and kick until your player flashes, and unleash a furious fireball attack that grows more powerful as you level up. Go for running attacks that are running and stuff. Tear shit up. If nothing else, it at least controls well enough, the grappling notwithstanding, the combat is satisfying for the most part, and the slow pacing suits the game just fine. These lumbering beasts should be slow, not speedsters after all. And like I said, playing this with a second player, just wrecking everything in sight as well as each other, it'll be easier to forgive some of the quibbles if it means pure monster mayhem, and that's what you're getting with King of the Monsters. For what it's worth, King of the Monsters is a halfway decent looking game. Let's not bother with comparisons because I'm sure some details and some bits of animation may have been lost in the translation, but on its own merits on the SNES, it's a perfectly fine looking little game. The monsters might be a bit on the small side, but they look imposing enough, and when they're near their end, they start to look tired, which is a nice touch. The city looks scenic enough and poised to be demolished by your demolition crew. It would have been nice, however, if the cities were a little more distinct from each other. There are some minor differences here and there between the various cityscapes, but for the most part, they all look sort of the same-ish. But on a whole, it's a fun-looking game. On the audio front, there's some halfway decent music, somewhat foreboding and sometimes a bit more upbeat than I would have liked, but it's something that fills the audible background while a bunch of crunching sound effects and monstrous growls play up front. Probably sounds better on the Neo Geo, but as it is, it's alright. It fits the mood and the tone just fine. Overall, King of the Monsters on the Super Nintendo, it's okay. It's got some minor quibbles, it's got some missing pieces, about 2 of them, and it's probably not the best monster brawling game out there, but it has its moments, it's fun for a lark, it makes for a nice 2-player brawling thing, and for those wanting a little city deconstruction via Monster Rampage, it more than satisfies. Play this with a buddy for best results, and then once you're done, play the Neo Geo version that has more stuff and is a little better quality. I think it's on the current consoles through those arcade archive things, but I'm not quite sure. But in any event, King of the Monsters, it's not perfect, it's not great, but it ain't bad, it's okay, it's fun. The end.